For years, we've been having a conversation in this country about policing, about use of force, about accountability, and about the fraught relationship between federal power and local communities. But often, that conversation unfolds in the abstract, as a debate over policies and principles. And then, in a single violent moment, it all becomes concrete. The theories collide with reality. The political rhetoric meets human life, and we're left to parse not just what happened, but what it means for the systems of power we've built and the democracy we inhabit. That moment happened this week in Minneapolis. A 37-year-old woman, Renee Good, was shot and killed by a federal immigration and customs enforcement agent during an operation. The incident was captured on video, which spread rapidly online. It triggered immediate and furious condemnation from local leaders, and a starkly different narrative from federal authorities. But this story is about more than one tragic event. It's about a fundamental clash between a city and a federal administration, between competing visions of safety and law enforcement, and between two irreconcilable accounts of reality. It raises deep, uncomfortable questions about immunity, sovereignty, and who, in the end, gets to decide what justice looks like. Let's start with what we know about the event itself. On Wednesday, in the Powderhorn neighborhood of Minneapolis, ICE agents were conducting an operation. Details are still emerging, but according to witness accounts and videos, a car was blocking a street, possibly as part of a protest against the federal presence. In one video, you can hear agents telling the driver to leave. An eyewitness, Emily Heller, described a chaotic and horrifying scene to local news. She said the driver, Renee Good, was trying to turn her car around. An ICE agent, later identified as Jonathan Ross, was in front of the vehicle. Heller's account is graphic. She states the agent leaned across the hood of the car and fired into the vehicle. He reached across the hood of the car and shot her in the face, Heller said. The car then rolled forward, crashing into a parked vehicle. In the background of the videos, shouts of "murderer" ring out. The response from Minneapolis officials was swift and scorching. Mayor Jacob Frey did not mince words. "They are not here to cause safety in this city," he said at a press conference. "What they are doing is causing chaos and distrust, and in this case, quite literally killing people." His directive to ICE was blunt. "Get the fuck out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here." He directly challenged the federal framing that was already taking shape, saying, "They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. That is bullshit." Governor Tim Walz called the federal response propaganda. But from the Department of Homeland Security, the story was utterly different. Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin issued a statement calling Good a violent rioter who had weaponized her vehicle in an act of domestic terrorism. She said the agent, fearing for his life, fired defensive shots. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem echoed the domestic terrorism label. Furthermore, McLaughlin laid blame at the feet of local politicians, referring to sanctuary politicians who fuel and encourage rampant assaults on our law enforcement. So, we have two completely opposing stories. One of a reckless, unjustified killing, another of a defensive action against a terrorist threat. This is more than a dispute over facts. It's a chasm between two worlds of understanding. And crucially, this occurred just about a mile from where George Floyd was killed in 2020, a geographic detail that hangs heavily over the entire event, reminding us that Minneapolis is a city deeply familiar with trauma, protest, and the quest for police accountability. Into this breach steps the legal system, or does it? Almost immediately, the Trump administration set up a shield. Vice President J.D. Vance declared the agent, Jonathan Ross, is protected by absolute immunity. "You have a federal law enforcement official engaging in federal law enforcement action," Vance said. "That guy is protected by absolute immunity. He was doing his job." The message was clear. This is not up for debate. The federal agent is untouchable, but is that true? To understand that, reporters spoke with Robert Bennett, a veteran Minneapolis attorney with 5 decades of experience in police misconduct cases. His view challenges the administration's head-on. "ICE agents do not have absolute immunity," Bennett states flatly. He argues that Minnesota has every right to prosecute a federal agent for misconduct committed within its borders, but he points to a major, immediate obstacle: the federal takeover of the investigation. The FBI and federal authorities have essentially sidelined the state's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, blocking their access to evidence and interviews. So, the entity that declared the shooting justified is now controlling the flow of information needed to independently assess that very claim. Bennett's analysis of the video is rooted in legal precedent. He points out that while there were multiple ICE agents on the scene, only Agent Ross fired his weapon. That's a bad fact for Ross, Bennett notes. In use of force law, the standard is objective reasonableness. Would a reasonable officer, facing the same circumstances, have perceived an immediate threat of death or serious harm? The inaction of Ross's colleagues suggests they did not. He also highlights the agent's decision to step in front of the vehicle, citing a recent Supreme Court case, Barnes v. Felix. In that case, the court questioned an officer who put himself in danger and then used that dangerous position to justify force. You can't bootstrap your own bad situation to allow a use of force, Bennett explains. And he dismisses the Supremacy Clause argument that a state can't charge a federal officer acting within his duties with a stark rhetorical question: do you think killing people is acting within the scope of their duties? What if they decided to kill the 435,000 people in the city of Minneapolis while they were here? Would the Supremacy Clause give them a free pass? I don't think so. The legal path, however, is being actively blocked. Bennett notes that federal law actually anticipates state prosecutions of federal officers by allowing for their removal to federal court. If there was immunity of an absolute nature, he argues, you wouldn't need that section. So, we have a legal battle taking shape, but it's a battle over the very right to have a battle. It's a procedural fight over who gets to investigate, to interpret, to narrate. This incident didn't occur in a vacuum. It came just a day after the Department of Homeland Security announced it was deploying 2,000 federal agents and officers to the Minneapolis area. Local leaders, including Governor Walz, condemned this as a politically motivated war being waged against Minnesota. There have been reports of violent tactics and profiling of Somali residents in recent weeks. This context makes Mayor Frey's plea for peaceful protest all the more poignant and strategic. He warned that the administration might be looking for a pretext to justify a full military occupation. They want us to respond in a way that creates a military occupation, he said. Let's not let them. Let's rise to this occasion. It's a chilling thought that an event like this could be a provocation, a trap, a step in a broader escalation, and it forces us to ask a foundational question. What is the relationship between federal power and an American city that does not want it there? When the federal government's narrative and a city's experience are diametrically opposed, who decides the truth? When the federal government declares its own agents immune and controls the investigation into their actions, where does accountability reside? The administration's language is telling. They didn't just say it was a justified shooting. They labeled it domestic terrorism. That's a powerful, politically charged term that immediately frames the discussion, demonizes the victim, and elevates the agent to a defender of the homeland. This is about more than one agent's split-second decision. It's about power. The power to define reality, the power to declare immunity, the power to occupy a city against its will, and the power to label dissent as terrorism. The tragedy of Renee Good's death is the stark, human cost at the center of this. But swirling around it is a struggle over the very mechanisms of justice and narrative in a polarized nation. It's a case study in what happens when the bonds of trust between different levels of government snap, and when the tools of state power are wielded not just to enforce law, but to enforce a political story. The question for Minneapolis, and for all of us, is what happens next? When the legal doors are being closed by the very entity accused of wrongdoing, where do you go? To the courts, if they can find a way in? To the ballot box? To the streets? This is the raw, unsettled politics of our moment, playing out on a single street corner under the shadow of history. Thank you for watching.